Can we let it hit, Colin? There we go. Quietly a Billy Idol fan. I have an extensive knowledge of the catalog of one
Really?
Billy Idol. Yeah.
I don't hear a lot of Billy Idol fans. Like, I know people like his music. He had a few hits, but you're an actual, real, diehard fan of Billy Idol?
I would say that maybe not diehard. Not quite on Springsteen level or anything like that. Or Choclair. Was that who we were talking about the other day? I like Choclair.
Yes, with Cody Coulter from Peterborough.
By the way, I saw on his Facebook page, Cody Coulter Music, that he is now in a relationship, and I drew the correlation to his appearance on this here program. Like, the female fans were just flocking after that. Like, there's no doubt
We
about
helped
it.
him out. Yeah, we definitely played a big role in that.
Interesting story, Colin, and you can check this out on our Facebook page. We were kind of talking about this around the office, and we get interesting perspectives because we do have some smokers, but a Japanese company is giving non-smokers an extra 6 days of vacation every year to make up for all the lost time caused by smokers who take smoke breaks.
I am totally on board with this.
It's about time.
I am totally on board with this.
That's about time.
I work way too hard, and I don't smoke, and I get in trouble for taking a 35-minute lunch break, okay, which I'm allowed to do.
Yes.
I am all for this.
I always said, and this might offend some people, so I apologize, but you know what? You just got to lay it out sometimes. I always said there are certain people who haven't made in the shade when it comes to optics of the workplace, and one of them is smokers, and one of them is those with young kids. Now, I don't have young kids right now. I'm sure I will go through it, but that always seemed like the no questions asked sort of get out of jail free card with like, oh, my kid's sick, I'm not coming in today. So if you had a young kid and you smoked, I mean, you just had everything going for you.
So not to, bury this person in my family, I won't mention his name, he's my uncle, but he worked for a moving company for years, and he just retired. And, we were at his retirement dinner the other day when I was back home, and he was, talking about how he worked hard and stuff, and he goes, guys, I smoked all my life. I probably only worked half the years I was paid for. And he had retired, so we felt like he could say that, but he probably took 5 or 6 smoke breaks a day, smoked a pack, and that was what he said. He said, you know what, you add up his hours, you add up his minutes. When he goes to heaven one day, you'll look at his work life, and he's, oh, you know what, half of it was spent outside smoking.
Let's tag in our man Brian Goldfinger personal injury law. I would suggest that people that are non-smokers, I mean, we deserve to have random newspaper breaks or something, every 5 minutes, just hop outside, bring a paper with you, why not? What's going on, Brian? How are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very good. It's been a while since we've caught up. How you been keeping?
I've been keeping really well. I want to congratulate you guys on the big Peterborough Business Community Award for marketing and advertising. It's huge.
Well, thank you so much. There's so many people I want to thank here, but I don't have enough time. No, thank you. That was a huge deal for our company. Something we were extremely proud of. And as somebody who supported this radio station for a real long time, Brian, I mean, you're part of it, man. You're definitely part of it.
I came in and I was just making a comment. You guys have a beautiful trophy and a certificate from the Honorable Mary Monsef congratulating you. You guys now need a trophy case for all your hardware.
I believe we have a trophy there too, Colin. Is that for fantasy football?
Yes. For all my complaining for fantasy football, I won the prize for most complaints for my fantasy football team.
There you go. That's over there.
Proudly in our window of our studio.
Definitely. Brian, I mean, what have you been up to, man? So, you been doing all right? How's that family? Doing everything good?
Family's great. Been handling some pretty interesting cases over the past few months involving accidents involving drunk driving, accidents involving distracted driving, accidents involving drag racing as well. So a pretty mixed bag over the past few months, and it's been keeping us on our toes.
Drag racing?
Drag racing, yeah.
My Lord.
Drag racing.
Man, that's a dangerous topic. Yeah. Definitely,
Don't do it. To all the listeners out there, don't do it. It's the crazy thing about that case was the person who did it, who was at fault for drag racing, they immediately fled the country after the accident. So it raised a lot of insurance coverage issues, which made the case very, very complicated.
I was going to say, if somebody decides to get out of the country, I mean, from a legal point of view, obviously that creates a whole bunch of hurdles that you'd have to go through.
It does create a lot of hurdles. Having said that, we're pretty fortunate here in Ontario that there is a system in place whereby if there is no insurance on the vehicle, ultimately the government would step in and pay out the claim, but they only pay it out to a maximum of $200,000, whereas if there were insurance on the claim, it would go to the policy limits, and the policy limits on a standard policy are $1 million, but they could be made more. So it diminishes the value of the claim if there's no insurance in a drag racing case like that. But at the same time, it's not like perhaps another jurisdiction where if there's no insurance, there's no luck whatsoever.
Now, when we're talking about drag racing, are we talking about like what most people would think of, which is like close your eyes, we're going to race down this street, or are we talking about somebody who got clocked doing 50 over the limit?
In this example, they were drag racing on the DVP after a late night, say at the club or something. Well, after 2 a.m, saying, "Well, how fast can we go and make it from perhaps downtown Toronto to Newmarket? Who knows?"
Oh, right, okay.
So they're clocked at going. In that example, they were going well over, I think, in around 150, 160, something ridiculous on the DVP. It was quiet at the time, but it's still the DVP. It's still a highway, and it was just a very emotional case and a very complicated one with the insurance issues.
Definitely. Brian Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. He is our legal analyst here on Talk Sports Radio Extra 90.5. Now, you mentioned, and I was reading a blog, which I always stay logged to. Very good. I love it, and it usually gives me nice little talking points. And you mentioned the idea of some changes maybe to laws and or rules, and then you get into, whether it be distracted driving or even distracted walking, pedestrian collisions, right? Yeah. And that's something that, Colin, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, this idea of adapting to the technology age. I mean, distracted walking is not something we probably had to worry about 20 years ago.
This is my hot take of the week, Brian. You work in Toronto. You know how it is if you're near Bloor, Jarvis, or if you're downtown in the heat of the action, okay? I drive down there all the time to go do my shifts in Toronto. When I'm there, I see a huge herd of people who walk across the street. There's probably about 10 people in that herd that are glued to their phone, not paying attention, and there are other cars that can turn rights across traffic, and I have seen probably 6 or 7 like near-death accidents just because people are glued to their phones. And look, it's an addiction. A lot of people are addicted to their cell phones. I am. I have to put mine in my glove compartment just so I don't reach for it while I'm driving. Are we going to get to a point where in society now, like you're going to have to get into your car and it's like a breathalyzer test, but for your cell phone, you're going to have to like lock it in your trunk? Like, how do you combat these issues when people are all of a sudden glued to their cell phones all the time?
I think that it's a private member's bill that they're seeking to introduce on. It's called distracted walking. The name of the bill, I think, is aptly named the Heads Up Phones Down Act, or the other way. And it would propose to implement I think a $50 fine if you are distracted walking across an intersection. What's interesting is that under the Highway Traffic Act, there's a reverse onus. So if a car hits a pedestrian, the car has to show why they are not at fault for the accident. If you implement the Heads Up Phones Down Act, would that counteract with the reverse onus provisions in the Highway Traffic Act, meaning would the reverse onus no longer be in existence? So I agree with all your points. We have to protect us from us. And there's a lot of people who are they're called zombie walks, and they're not focusing to where they're walking. But I'm interested at the interplay between the reverse onus provisions under the Highway Traffic Act versus this proposed new act. And I hope it does come in. I really do, and I agree with all your points. Now,
mention that you talked about the onus being on the driver. They have to prove a circumstance in which they hit the pedestrian and they were not at fault, because right. I think a lot of people, I think it's common knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people know that no matter what, the benefit of the doubt is given to the pedestrian, unless you can prove that, wow, it was dark at night and he's wearing dark clothes and he's walking down the middle of a road, yada, yada, yada.
The benefit of the doubt, that's the reverse onus, is given to the pedestrian where a car hits a pedestrian. If it's car on car, there's no benefit of the doubt for anybody. You have to prove who is at fault. But car versus pedestrian, you have that provision.
And would one of those scenarios, like right now, if pedestrians walking on the street and they have their phone out, right now there's no real law that kind of governs that sort of thing?
There's no law. There's no law right now for distracted walking, and that's what they want to bring in. So I hope they do.
Yeah, very good stuff. Brian Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. Right with us here on the regulars, Talk Sports Radio Extra 90.5. All right, my legal man, the Raptors are in action tonight. I know you're a big basketball fan, okay? And I think there could have been a personal injury case for how badly they were abused by Jamal Murray the other night, particularly in the third quarter, which part of me was like, you know what? I like to see that Canadians getting it done, not against Toronto, though. Ultimately, what do you make of this year's Raptors squad?
I like the direction and the idea of the new offense. It's a very basic basketball principle: share the ball, get a good shot. And they implemented that shortly after they traded Rudy Gay, if you remember the Rudy Gay trade, and they were trying to blow up the team. And they were playing some really beautiful basketball, sharing the ball. And I love seeing that. The problem is they just can't knock down shots or open shots, and that's the frustrating thing. So the process is there, but the end result simply hasn't been there for a lot of the games I've seen, even in the wins. I get frustrated watching them because they just can't knock down shots. So what I'm proposing is that the three of us work on our corner threes. We'll send an email to Masai and say, hey, we got 3 guys here who can knock down the corner three. We'll play for the rookie minimum or the veteran minimum, whatever it might be. And I think the Raptors will save some money on cap room. Hopefully the three of us can knock down some shots and we'll lead them to a few wins.
Well, you know who was the king of that back in the day for the Raptors was Donyell Marshall. Camped out over in the corner. Man, he used to swish some. That's for sure. Funny story, and it's funny you bring that up because I played in a Harlem Globetrotters exhibition game when I was working down in Durham region. Radio stations were involved or whatever. So I get out there, and I know that I'm only going to be on the court for a max 1 minute, so I wanted to get all my money's worth. I did, in fact, nail a corner three-pointer, and I had it on my phone, but it was like an old phone, and it ended up not saving. But there was a clip of me somewhere nailing down a three-pointer. So you're on to something there. I'm not sure. Colin, how was your shooting game?
You know what? I was a big man growing up, but I did hit my first three-pointer in a tournament against Lisgar Collegiate. Ooh. Okay, this was like the smartest school in Ottawa. They weren't a very good basketball team, but in attendance in that game, Dave Smart, head coach, Carleton Ravens, who used to coach at my high school.
Oh, did he come out to recruit you?
I went up to him, but he didn't. He didn't think much of me. He didn't have the time of day for me. Yeah. But no, I had a bit of a 3-point shot. I was a poor man's Kyle Korver.
Oh, is that right?
Let's just say that.
I thought you were going to go Dirk Nowitzki.
I was all defense. That's the only reason I played.
Well, that's,
I was the Bruce Bowen.
That's good.
They could use you.
Are you at least encouraged, Brian, and I'm curious to get your take on this. So everyone knows about the Gordon Hayward injury. So the Celtics, while they still may be good, they are not going to be as good as they might have been with Gordon Hayward. Cleveland, I'm not worried about them. They're sleepwalking right now. But are you looking and assessing? Washington's had a couple of bad losses. They lost in Phoenix the other night. Are you at least looking around the Eastern Conference thinking this thing might be a little bit more wide open than maybe you had originally thought?
Yeah, but it's still too early to tell because they started the season earlier than they would have, and I think you're seeing a lot of rust on a lot of the teams. So LeBron's got so many, miles, kilometers on his legs from playing in how many finals in a row now?
Six, seven,
whatever it is. So he's used to a longer offseason. Golden State, they're still, in their championship hangover. Kyle Lowry, he looks so sluggish out there on the floor. Jamal Murray is a good example that you alluded to because the point guard penetration for the opposing point guards has been so significant because Lowry's defense has been so poor. I'm just having a tough time assessing because it looks like they're kind of weeks or months behind where they should be right now. And I attribute that perhaps to the earlier season or their focus on and their realization, regular season, let's just go through the motions. Playoff is really when it matters.
I'm not sure when you kind of make the switch, but one player who's really struggled to me is Norman Powell. Yeah. He has not looked very good so far.
Yeah, and Norman's problem, I think, is all in his head. And he's playing with the starters, he's playing with a lot of ball-dominant guys. Serge Ibaka, a weird stat about him is he has, I think, like 60 field goal makes and only 2 or 3 assists. So Serge Ibaka, he doesn't pass the ball. Jonas isn't known for his passing. Kyle's a pretty ball-heavy guy, and so is DeMar. So how does Norman fit into that? And he's just having a tough time finding himself. I think it's all mental. I don't think it's for lack of effort, but I think his game will come around. I do.
Brian, when you were younger, who was your favorite team originally growing up?
Before the Toronto Raptors came to Toronto, it was the Detroit Pistons.
Oh, the Bad Boys.
Bad Boys.
I love them.
Bill Laimbeer?
I love them all.
Was it Joe Dumars?
Joe Dumars. Yeah. Vinny Microwave Johnson. I don't know if you remember him, but to the listeners out there, they called him the microwave because he'd come off the bench and he'd heat up just like a microwave.
Great nickname.
Yeah, great name. James Edwards, he looked like he always got out of prison. Like he was a very angry man.
You had some good Rodman years, too.
Great Rodman years. John Spider Sally. take you back to Kelly Tripucka. I don't know if you know him.
No.
But I was a huge, big Piston fan, and then the Raptors came, and I've been on the bandwagon ever since.
Of course, we didn't even mention Isaiah Thomas, but
No,
he's the obvious one.
He's obvious.
Yeah, he's definitely obvious there. You're listening to the regulars here. Jordan Mercier alongside Colin Teske, our man Brian Goldfinger visiting us.
And Brian, I got to ask you, it's a long time away from this, but there's lots of speculation where LeBron's going to go. It's not going to be in Cleveland, is it? You think he's going somewhere else?
He's going to L.A.
That's what I'm saying, too.
LA, yeah.
I think everything is shaping up to go to L.A. Yeah. Younger, better place for him to do his business and his acting career.
He's going to L.A. That's really what I think.
See, we're on the same page.
Have you guys been watching Oklahoma City play?
I have been. I have a keen interest because, as you may have known, I'm an Indiana Pacer fan, so I've been steadily rooting against Paul George. And by the way, I think that trade ended up better for Indiana than most people had thought. I'm not going to say they won the trade, but Oladipo has looked fantastic so far, and Sabonis is double-double machine.
He's good.
If we turn this into Pacer radio for a second, I'm excited, but I have been watching Oklahoma City.
They look good.
Yeah, they certainly do, yeah.
Carmelo Anthony looks like he's reborn, playing on like Team USA. And Paul George is one of my favorite players in the league.
He's a good player.
He's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Brian, of course, you are one of the best personal injury lawyers that I know. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in your services?
They can visit the website at goldfingerlaw.com or email me at Brian, BRIAN, at goldfingerlaw.com.
You know what? It's been so long since you've been here, I didn't even give you the proper intro. Boy, we missed on that one, didn't we?
Goldfinger.
He's the man. The man with the Midas touch.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Yeah. Brian, thank you so much for coming in today. Appreciate it as always, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up again very soon.
Sounds good. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, listen to the regulars. Peterborough Roundtable number 2 coming up in hour number 2. We will chat with the Pitbull Paul Rellinger up next.